Welcome back to the Culture Report. I'm Osiris, and today we're looking at a game called El Paso Elsewhere. Developed and self-published by indie studio Strange Scaffold, El Paso is a third-person shooter with supernatural neo-noir elements, and is combined with this punchy bullet-time shooting that's really reminiscent of early Max Payne. The whole package comes together really well for the most part, and the moody levels and great soundtrack create this atmosphere that really pull you into the world. I was initially blown away. It's like the Blade game I never knew I needed. You play as James Savage, a black man and paranormal investigator with a pill and gun collection to rival Max himself. But instead of mobs and shadow organizations, James fights creatures of the night. Vampires, werewolves, demonic brides, evil elevators, and a lot more. But his true target is his ex-girlfriend, a woman named Janet Drake, aka Dracula. I mostly fully recommend this experience. I was having a blast with the first half, but there's a few moments where the difficulty spikes so egregiously that it's hard to ignore. The second half feels a bit uneven. I was enjoying the trippy visuals of the floating hotel and the disembodied graveyards, but I wasn't as into some of the later levels, nor the game's full turn into cosmic horror at a certain point. James monologues quite a bit, and his voice acting is great. It's really clear that Max Payne's own running internal monologue was an influence, but sometimes James feels just a bit more wordy and less stoic. Max also had other characters to kind of bounce his lines off of, where James just does not. Up until about chapter 25 to 30, I would call the pacing and level construction really good. There's lots of ledges to dive over and breakable objects in places that make sense. But later on in the game, some of this starts to fall apart just a little bit. You're slowly introduced to parts of James's arsenal, from his wooden stakes to his shotgun, rifles, and grenade launchers. Each early level that introduces a new weapon seems constructed specifically to encourage the player to try out that new gun, which I think is really thoughtful level design. The levels usually start with James exiting an elevator, and they then consist of him saving a few innocent people and using keys to unlock doors. It's classic gamer stuff. I can appreciate this simplicity because it allows the gunplay to take center stage, and for the most part, that's awesome. Mowing down and or staking hordes of undead feels really great here. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the game had a solid modding community either. It almost feels built for more skins, more guns, etc. I kept thinking we unlocked dual Uzis, but it just never happened. Modders, please. There's also a decent variety of enemies, and each archetype has a stronger version that appears in the later levels. In-game, you'll fight vampires and werewolves, of course, but there's also the projectile-throwing demon brides, biblically accurate angels, and these weird puppeteer witches, and bigger monstrosities which require 2 to 3 stakes to kill, as opposed to the one shot the stake is for everything else. In between levels, James will give a few monologues, and like I said earlier, I think the voice acting is really good here. I was invested in seeing him hunt down his evil ex before her armies of darkness destroyed the world. There's a ton of narrative momentum coming out of those first chapters, but I still think the game loses steam towards the midpoint, and when you reach that fight with the first boss named DJ, I kind of don't think the game really recovers after that. So I gotta say, the boss fights suck. There's 2 of them, one in the mid game against DJ, and then another one at the end against Janet, aka Dracula. They are both bad in my opinion, and it really just comes down to a mismatch of mechanics. El Paso as a game is pretty much supernatural Max Payne, but these 2 fights feel like they were inspired by Dark Souls, which becomes a problem. Fundamentally, a Max Payne style shooter and a Souls-like game are asking players for 2 very different things. In a shooter like this, I would play it for a casual experience. I just turn off my brain and do cool shit. It's relaxing. But loading up a Souls game, you're conditioned early on to accept the frustration of death and failure because it's necessary to complete that feedback loop of once you finally beat the tough boss or level. So after 20 or so levels of being the unstoppable badass vampire killer, you're suddenly getting one-tapped by a spotty hitbox from a boss level enemy in a game you didn't even know had boss fights. And yeah, you can say, oh, get good. But if you're not playing for challenge, then that could be a potentially frustrating and game-breaking experience for a player. These two fights occur at levels 30 and 50, so they're pretty deep into the game, and they aren't constantly happening, but they are still definite low points and worth looking past just so that you can enjoy some of the better aspects of the game. In general, the second half of the game is less interesting. There are no new enemies being introduced, just stronger versions of enemies we've already been fighting. Another criticism I saw was about the implementation of a Max Payne-inspired system without at least copying some of the shootout aspects that combat encounters in those games have. The reason Max can do cool shoot dodges is to avoid the bullets that will be coming back at him. But in this game, I rarely had to use the dodge move just because most enemies are fast-moving melee attackers. The game encourages dodging the Demon Bride's projectiles, but because of hitboxing, it rarely works. The blast for the projectile is too large, so diving usually just gets James killed. Spotty hitboxing is actually pretty common for the game. Sometimes it helps, and sometimes it hurts, but it can still be frustrating either way. El Paso is pretty light on story. You're just following James's mission to stop his ex. It's a pretty good excuse to shoot a bunch of vampires, but I think it loses some of its steam towards the end. And then the level design suffers too. There's the excuse that we're exploring a liminal space, but it can feel jarring to go from an Egyptian-style tomb to a bathroom, to a castle, to a graveyard in really quick succession. Once I finally made it to the final boss, I was kind of glad the game was over, which surprised me. Everything started really strong, but it does feel stretched thin towards the end. I was also frustrated to find myself in another multi-stage Souls fight. I can see where these fights are supposed to be narrative and mechanical set pieces, but for me, it just did not work. I should note that the game's options are extremely customizable, difficulty included. You can turn on infinite lives, ammo, stakes. So if you're struggling, you really don't have to. But I played it through on the intended difficulty. So this is my perception of the gameplay as the developers intended it to be. The game's main antagonist, Dracula, is James's ex, but she's a bit of a nothing burger. She's responsible for all these monsters you're fighting, and she's trying to do a ritual to end the world, but you never really find out why, or if she said it, I missed it. She's almost better in James's monologues alone. The way he describes her physical and psychological torture kind of eclipses the version of the character you actually meet, and that was disappointing. So, where does El Paso Elsewhere land on the representation grading scale? Well, it's such a great idea, man. Blade plus Max Payne. And a lot of times the experience is awesome. You turn off your brain, listen to the surprisingly good original soundtrack, and kill everything. But it's just too uneven. That second half was kind of a slog. It turned aspects of the gameplay I initially really enjoyed into a chore, which I think hurt the experience overall, like a bad aftertaste. What I really don't understand is the why of it all. The first half is great on its own, and with or without mods, I think those levels just have a lot of replayability. But the second half really kind of falls apart. This one's a B-/C+.
Don't be alarmed, we're Negroes.
Oh man, no, that's too much bass in your voice.
I could really see someone picking this up and falling in love. There's a ton of potential here for what should and could be a classic series. But I also could see someone picking it up and finding the flaws in this installment to be too glaring, which I really think is a shame. But what do you guys think? Comment below, and thanks for watching.
Lay him down. I got them nights that don't play around. Hit up the bishop to pray for the sound. We playing chess, we taking the crown. Come to your castle, we breaking it down.